We'll start next door and then we'll come back over here.
Okay.
Because we got really cool stuff next door. Start from the beginning then, essentially now, because we started here. So, so this room is definitely like the museum room. Like you've got some really cool pieces you'll never see anywhere else. Like a Pioneer SX 1980. Like this was like their top of the line Pioneer made back in the day. Like that's like probably one of the most prized pieces here. Now it's like an $8,000 to $10,000 receiver. It's insanity. That one's working. Sounds great. It just needs like a little tweaking in the FM. That's it. I mean, we're so close. We'll be able to get it. And then this Marantz is pretty big too. This is like 185 watts per channel. Kind of rare. Like not as rare as the Pioneer, but this one came from the guy who created the digital camera over in Rochester. This guy is someone. So I said, "Who are you?" He's like, "Oh, I created the digital camera." I'm like, "Oh, that's crazy." And he's like, "You want to see all my medals I got from like President Obama and stuff?" I'm like, "Sure." So we went in, and his whole wall was filled with medals and stuff. And I'm like, "What? This is crazy." This is what he was listening to when he created the digital camera that we're using right now. It's a reel-to-reel right here. This is a reel.
Is this film?
It's kind of like if you think of it like a big cassette player. Essentially the same idea, but this is like predates the cassettes. It's like what they would originally transfer like when they do recordings and stuff like that, they do it to reel-to-reel. It goes to tape and then it gets cut to vinyl. So that's like all your original recordings were done on half-inch reel or whatever first. And then they can piece it all together and make the recording, mix it, master it with the tape. And then they cut it on a lathe to make the records. And then, so that's why that's technically like a better quality. Like that's why there's some people that are really into reels because it's like going the next like step past like vinyl. This rack here of some really cool stuff. I mean, like Harman Kardon is still around today, and this is like one of their really early pieces. Like this is like 1960, the big tube amplifier. Those are super hard to find nowadays. And then you have like Fisher. You have Audio Research. I mean, this is Fisher's last tube receiver they made in 1970. It was only sold on a few Army bases overseas. I think it was just Army specifically. In 1970, so someone bought that overseas, shipped it back. It's crazy that it still exists. How many did they even make? Because like you could see they're kind of like they changed the style. It used to be a full like silver plate, and now they do like this nice like maroon like color on the bottom. And that was to kind of be like times were changing to solid states, so they were reinventing their designs. So they were kind of like tricking you to think like this is the future, but it's still tube. It's not transistorized. I know you want that because you don't want to deal with the tubes anymore. But look, we made a modern faceplate. It kind of looks solid state-ish, so that's really cool. Then you have Macintosh, which is still around today, so they're cool. They're in Binghamton. They're only a couple hours away, so they still make crazy expensive equipment today. But this stuff's extremely sought after still. Guard 301s. I love these turntables. Like this is like the table they used to cut all the Beatle albums. Like over at Abbey Road Studio, they used 301s. So
who made?
And out of England, they were made over there. And they were sold. They sold a bunch of them back in the day. They were like good radio station turntables. Huh. So it's super cool to have a few of them. I have all the 3 versions.
Wow.
This is the second version. This is the first version. This is the 716th one made, which is pretty cool.
That's amazing.
So that's like one of the originals. Probably the first year of production, which is insanity. That one came out of Rochester.
Wow.
I actually found that in an old console. And I just happened to see it at like 1 a.m. What the freaking hell is that?
Like Marketplace?
Yeah, I was just like, what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, this is a Garrard turntable. And then when I messaged them, they were like, yeah, you can just throw out the turntable. I'm like, I'll be there tomorrow. Like, yes, I want this. This is going with me. Yeah, a lot of people come to us because we're like one of the last shops, so they'll come to here. Because like if you can't fix it, it's just got a pretty piece to look at in Navy. Because I was bored and there was nothing going on. I lived in like the middle of the swamp in Georgia. It was horrible. Like we had nothing to do. I liked records. And then I bought like an old turntable that had like one of these like vinyl bases, kind of like this. It's like a 1970 turntable. I just like the vinyl color. I'm like, I like that wood. It's cool. So I went and bought it. The guy I bought it from was like in his 50s, and he had like all these tubes. So I see like all these lit up. like this. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? He's like, it's a tube amplifier. I'm like, dude, I have no idea what that is. I'm 23 years old. I've never seen that before. Like, I stayed there for like 5 hours, and it just like, all of a sudden I was like, this is what I'm gonna do the rest of my life. It was weird. It was like instant. YouTube, I just started reading like everything I could about this stuff. I wanted to know like what to buy, and then Ben was teaching me. He was like my professor in audio. He was like, buy this if you see this. And like I was going out and I hoarded my whole barracks room in stereo. It was like I'm in this tiny shoebox, and there was just thousands of records. There's like this antique radio supply site. There's a bunch of them out there that are still selling quality parts, and you know, it's great. You can get pretty much anything for most of this stuff. Yeah, like I have to work with Don and say, do you need this? And is this the right transistor? Is this the right cap? Is this gonna fit? Is this the right size? All these things play in. I mean, like here's from CE Manufacturing. So this is like a can capacitor. So these always go bad, and they cause like a hum. And they're like filled with this like electrolytic paste that dries up. It's kind of like a battery. Wow. So when they get old, like they sometimes like will leak out of the bottom. And all this stuff though that's like from the 60s, they're all bad. So you gotta swap them. But like with the new capacitors, like for like the 70s stuff like that, kind of like that Pioneer. Like this is like a capacitor you replace into something bigger for solid state. But most of the ones that they use still test really well, so they hold up. They're holding up way better than the stuff from the tube equipment. So usually these still are good, but people will replace them, or if you want to spend a couple $100 and have it last another 50, 60 years, you know, put these in, which is cool. Overflow, I like trying to keep the windows open so Tom can get to the plants, because the plants need love. These here that he's growing, that like came off, and he has them and then replants them, so we just keep getting more and more plants like this, but we're helping them out.
No, this isn't something you normally do?
Like Mr. B does a little bit of everything. But like Mr. B does a lot of like fruit table work, and stuff like that. And he puts little notes on it when he's done, which helps me, because then I'm like, okay, we don't need to touch that again, right, Mr. B? Yeah. And then Damon's corner, you gotta see Damon's corner too. So Damon's working on a Macintosh right now, which is cool. So he's swapping out all the can capacitors, which we just got, I believe. And this is the old one, so you can see it's a little leaky there. See how that's coming out of the cap there. And then some of the resistors are out of tolerance, bad, overheating. So it's pretty cool to see like Macintosh stuff, you know, being worked on, because that's like one of the main guys, Terry DeWick, that was like the guru. He's like the one guy that everyone would send their stuff to. Just passed away. I just saw it yesterday. I'm like, oh my god! But he was like just like Damon or Mr. B or Don. He was like one of them. And there's so few of them left, but he was like known as like the Macintosh guy. There's not. I mean, they just have to be able to read a schematic, and then you can kind of figure this stuff out. Like after they, like Don went to school in Rochester at RIT, I think, for electrical, I believe, some sort, and he just kind of, this just fit for him.
It's definitely,
like, look at everything that's going on here. This is insanity.
That's
like,
a lot.
And this could kill you too. Like there's like voltages in here that can, like, if you don't know what you're doing, like, you can easily kill yourself, especially tube stuff. It's like deadly. So yeah, these guys, it's great. They know what they're doing, so we don't have any problems.
What is this here?
The Variac. So that's so you could plug into this, and you can bring because like when these sit for a long time, and you plug in something in, like a lot of people will be like, oh, I found my mom's old tube radio, like the 60s, late 50s, you know, you find something like this in an estate sale, and you're like, oh my god, it's so cool, let me plug it in. But all those capacitors are like old batteries essentially, and the paste is like leaking out and stuff like that, so when you plug it in, it does more damage than ever, because they're like, they're sitting so long. It's like a car too, like parked idle forever. It has no gas in it, and you're like, I'm gonna start it up with like the littlest amount of gas. Like, let's do this, and then I'm gonna rev the engine, and then all of a sudden you're like, Rrr, and like full goose it. So that's like when you plug these into a wall socket, the unit's like, oh my god, I've been dead for like 80 years. It like starts freaking going up in smoke on you or whatever.
So if you find an old piece of equipment, don't plug it in. Bring it to a
someone that can work on it. Yes, if it has tubes in it, 1000%. Do not plug it in. Even the solid state stuff, to be safe, because if it is a major problem, you're going to cause a lot more damage.
How do you know?
You know, if you're not going to use it all the time, like a car, then it has to go move on. Like, or it's just going to slowly keep breaking down and getting into a worse state. Like a lot of people's parents and stuff will probably have like something, you know, like a Silverface receiver kind of like laying around, and you know, they still have some value even if they're not working. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like, so I pick them up all the time. But a lot of the stuff's just sitting in attics, basements. Yeah, that's like top of the line quad, which is like 1973-ish. The quad was only out for about like 2 years. So it was 4-channel, like before they had surround sound.
Oh.
So that was like the early, like them trying to do it. And then they were like, it failed really hard because it was too hard to master the recordings for 4-channel back then. But they did try. It was a weird time. It was cool. But this is quad stuff that was only in the early 70s. And it was only for like 2 years, and then it was gone. Quad. But they usually have tons of issues, and they're really hard to work on because there's basically like 2 amps on each chassis. Fully, like it's like having 2 receivers in one. That's insanity. Like amount of components in there.
Yeah, too hard
So
for
like
the
then
average
you're
person.
getting, how are you gonna even work in there? It's like so crowded. Like this one has a scope too, so you can watch the music on that. It's really cool. It's a tube and it comes up and you can see it dance around and stuff and watch the music going through. It's like showing you the signal path. It's so this is like a modern one. And so that's where if he loses the signal or something, he can trace it and he can follow the signal path and see what, like if he's having a problem or distortion or whatever, and then he can trace down what's component is actually bad by using that, or where he's losing the signal. And then he goes and targets that area. And he's like, oh, cap's bad here, or resistor's out of tolerance here, and then he can replace that in.
So
nobody used a record player. Everybody threw out their records, and then late 90s, nobody cared. It was CDs only. It was like that little tiny, and then they came back to
it's called a CD player.
In like the 2000s, mid-2000s. I think it was like, started picking up around like 2006, 2007, and then just jazz. A lot of jazz. That's it. I don't even want to collect. I've figured out my collection. I'm not even going to deal with like, I like classic rock and stuff like that. I'm just going to stream that.
Sure.
And it's not like, so with jazz though, it all has a flow. I'll keep like Dark Side of the Moon because I'd listen to that the whole way through. Like Fleetwood Mac Rumors, I would listen the whole way. Like I love that's a great album. But unless I'm gonna listen to the whole album, I don't want it. I've got thousands of records, so I was just like, do I need like 15 copies of The Wall? No. But now that I have Whatnot, I'm just gonna do it through there because it's great. It's fun. I like being on there, like talking to the people who like audio and they come from Instagram.
Okay.
No, I'll show you the basement real quick. I wanted to show you kind of like how it went, like progressed. Like the basement is not as organized; it's mostly storage. So then we were like, okay, we're gonna go into the basement because after a year, I filled that whole room. It was maxed out, and I couldn't even work in there anymore. There was so much stuff in there. So I love this school building. It's just so cool. Yeah, this is like 1890s. I'm like, I'm never gonna fill this up. Like, there's no way are we gonna fill this whole thing up. And we did.
Oh my
In
God.
less than a year. In like 6 months, this was maxed out. So a little crazy. There's packing stuff. Thousands of records back behind here. A whole record collection there. And then this is all speakers. It's like a speaker room filled with speakers. And then you have it in this room, which is completely filled.
I wish that
Stuff.
people could smell how
smells
awesome
great.
it smells. Yeah.
And it's all like pretty organized. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
it
tons of test equipment. There, like I love looking from behind this door. If you sneak and close that, like all the transformers and meters and stuff.
Oh, so cool.
So yeah, I have no time to get to anything in the basement for like years. So I mean, you got all original boxes up there and stuff like that. But it's so dry; it stays like this all year round. Like this temperature, it's perfect. This basement is perfect.
It is. It's really nice.
So I'd like to do more with it, but I don't have any time. Because we had another workbench. We've got big tube amps on there right now. We've got like Fisher units in the box. There's Stromberg Carlson. This is out of Rochester. That's an integrated tube amp. It's a Magnavox from a console. I mean, you got Wharfdale speakers that came from somewhere.
A lot of history.
But there's a lot of history down here. There's lots of turntables and a little bit of everything. So we took this room before anyone else could move in. And that's how we ended up in this room now. Look at that.
Barney.
And now this is like the processing room where you have like Tom cleaning, my uncle cleaning, calling people. It's great to have this to show people. Like we've only been in here like a little over a year, so this was empty. And then now it's like full. I'm like, no. So who knows where we'll be in the next couple of years. It be crazy. Oh, we definitely want to keep expanding with like the, record side of it and stuff like that. So that'd be fun.
Is there any YouTubers that you trust? Because there's so much misinformation, but does anyone come to mind?
Honestly, most of the old guys are pretty good.
Are good.
Pretty honest. They just
Okay.
want to help. They're trying to pass along the knowledge. You know what I mean? So it's pretty cool. They're like putting videos and stuff for people to see. So
Okay.
It kind of keeps it going on and their like legacy going.
No matter what you listen to or what you're collecting. If you collect to spend time on your own, or if you collect to be social. If you just started your collection, or if you inherited your collection. If you've been collecting for a really long time. Bags Unlimited has been there since 1976 to protect America's collections. And we hope you'll join us for our new series, Our Shared Stories, the story of America's collectors, with Bags Unlimited.